It's neat. Adam Nimoy is a director. He's worked in the music industry. He's an author and also happens to be the son of Spock, Leonard Nimoy. His most recent projects includes his new book, The Most Human, and the film For the Love of Spock. Adam, welcome to JC Unplugged. This is really cool to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, JC. Appreciate it.
So much to dive into it. Talk to us about timeline. When Star Trek was being filmed, what age are you when all this is going down?
Well, they started production on that first season around May or June of 1966. I was 9, almost 10 years old. And during that summer, I was off of school, so I spent a lot of time on the set. I think I was on 4 or 5 different episodes, watching them, shoot occasionally. My dad would take me with him to work, so I was there, I'm really grateful I was old enough to kind of know what was going on. It was very exciting.
At what point did you and your whole family realize what the success of the show was happening? Was when it first hit the air, or when did things really start to take off for you guys?
Well, pretty soon after it premiered September 8th, 1966, just over 59 years ago. And almost immediately, within weeks, there was a lot of fan mail for Spock. There was a lot of interest in Mr. Spock. And we were interviewed by 16 magazine, which published our home address as the mailing address for fan mail.
No, really?
Yeah, and this happened very quickly. This is all first season stuff. This happened at the end of 66, early 67. And we started getting sacks of mail. So we knew, I mean, it was clear that people were turned on by Mr. Spock, and the paparazzi started showing up, and everything changed for us very quickly.
Would your father go through all that fan mail? Would you help him? Was that a family affair when all that fan mail would come through?
Yeah, that was one of our, family activities, was answering his fan mail.
How fun.
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool to read this stuff. I mean, it was just so novel for us. My dad had been struggling as an actor ever since he came to LA. That was 1949. This is 17 years later in 1966 when he finally had a major breakthrough. So it was really, actually, it was novel. It was exciting. It was like we hit the lottery ticket. It was just, everything changed for us, and we really enjoyed it.
At what point did the action figures and everything came out? They came out during the original run of the show. Did the action figures come out? And how was that seeing your dad as an action figure that you can play with?
Yeah, well, most of the merchandising actually happened a little later in the 70s, when the show went in syndication. This was a shock to me. I had never really seen this stuff, but then I was at school at UC Berkeley, and my roommate took me to a place called the Federation Trading Post on Telegraph Avenue, and it was just nothing but Star Trek. It was a little shop, and I'd never seen this stuff before.
Uh huh.
But it all, there were figurines, there were pictures of me on the set, when this is the cover of the book. It's like, they cut my hair and they put on a pair of Spock ears, and there were postcards of me, with my dad. I'd never seen this stuff before. But this was the kind of stuff that really started the whole merchandising issue that my dad had with Paramount, because they were not paying any royalties. There were no merchandise money coming to my dad, and they were cashing in on it with all these toys and these games and posters and postcards. And that's what started the lawsuit against Paramount in the 1970s.
Was your family getting royalties when the show went into syndication, or was it just for the first run? Originally, did they just get paid? Your father got paid for the first run, and then that was it? Or as kids growing up in the 70s and 80s, was your dad getting paid for every time those episodes were airing?
No, the residuals ran out. I think my dad told me at the time it was 3 runs and it was done.
Wow.
Yeah, so the syndication market there, the syndicated local affiliates were making money. The Paramount was making money. Nobody else was making money. A lot of, this was a big issue, and then in that decade, there was just no income for anybody from the original series, and that's why there's a big issue about the animated series. They didn't want to hire the entire original crew back. I mean, people were looking for money, and that's when the convention circuit started as well.
Do you go to, or when was the first time you went to a Star Trek convention? Did you go with your father, or was that to something that you weren't even interested in doing?
Yeah, I wasn't at that point. I was kind of burned out on it all. I went very briefly to one of the early conventions in Pasadena, but I never went to. There's a convention, a big one in Vegas,
Yep.
actually,
Yeah.
every summer, and I'm hoping to make an appearance there next year for the 60th anniversary, but I really didn't go. I went with my dad to one of his final conventions in Chicago, the last appearance he made.
Hmm.
But I had never been to the Las Vegas convention until we made my documentary about my dad, For the Love of Spock.
Yeah, that convention is huge. I've covered a couple times here for Channel 8, and I actually met Gene Roddenberry's son, Rod Roddenberry, there, and talking to him. And I believe he was born after Star Trek. Star Trek was already out when he was born, because he is. I think he was born in '74, so Star Trek was already a thing. And I asked him what was it like growing up, in that world, and he confessed to us that he's like Star Wars was my thing. Like Star Trek was my dad's thing. That was like, do you go like, are you all into your dad's business? No, this was like the cool thing. So he talked about growing up and being aware of Star Trek, but Star Wars was the world that he loved. I thought that was such an interesting thing that he dropped on us.
Yeah, I mean, I love connecting with Rod. He's still all things Star Trek. Roddenberry Entertainment still very much involved with the Star Trek legacy. Um, the guy's like my Star Trek brother. I mean, I love hanging out with him and swapping stories. It's just it's great that the legacy of his dad continues now, almost 60 years later.
Yeah, the convention, it's massive. It's even if you're not a Star Trek fan, just walking around there, it's really neat to see everyone's passion. We're talking to Adam Nimoy, the son of Leonard Nimoy. Let's talk about your relationship with your father, because it all wasn't roses growing up with your father. At what point was it always a great relationship, or at what point did things start to kind of branch apart between you two?
Well, I talk a lot about this in my new memoir, The Most Human, reconciling with my father, Leonard Nimoy, about the fact that I had a very awkward relationship with him when I was a kid. My dad was very focused on his career. Family was not a priority for him. I mean, he was very desperate to survive, frankly. I mean, before Star Trek came along, my dad had to hustle a lot of odd jobs in addition to doing small acting roles. So I wasn't really spending much time with him. He came from a whole different generation than I came from. This is a guy born in the Depression by Ukrainian immigrant parents in the West End of Boston. I was born in sunny Southern California, and it was a completely different lifestyle. So the trouble that we had, the awkwardness relating when I was a kid, kind of blossomed into a lot of conflict beginning when I was a teenager.
At what point did you start to reconnect with your father and get back together, and have a great relationship?
Well, it had a lot to do with recovery. My dad was an alcoholic, admittedly so, in an interview with Bill Shatner. I was your run-of-the-mill wake and baker. I was a pothead for 30 years, and that made things worse between us. I mean, we had these incredible experiences together. It was great being Leonard Nimoy's son, but at
Hmm.
the same time, every time there was a problem with, that we had an issue or a disagreement, it could be pretty, really nasty, drag out fights between the two of us. So it wasn't until we went into recovery, actually, that things started to get better between us, that we started to we put aside the substance abuse and we're practicing some principles of 12-step recovery. And this was in about 2006. We started to rebuild our relationship.
I was listening to an interview with you, and you were talking about your recovery process. And in one of the steps, is it uh, not be able to change everything around you, so you're in essence changing yourself? What's that actual step?
Well, it's the serenity prayer, basically.
Yes.
It's what we say at almost every meeting. God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, i.e., Leonard Nimoy. I was never going to change the guy. The courage to change the things we can, i.e., me, which is
Hmm.
hard enough to do as it is, and the wisdom to know the difference. I mean, that prayer we recite at the end of almost every 12-step meetings. The 12 steps of recovery are all, designed to help us figure out a new perspective, change our lives, change the way we deal with people, change the way we deal with difficult people, challenges in our life, living in life on life's term. All the steps of recovery are geared towards doing that. And it was practicing those steps and the help of people that I knew in recovery who really guided me on how to kind of navigate this complicated relationship with my father.
You talked about this letter that your dad wrote you, but you didn't. He wrote it to you when you were a kid, but you didn't discover this letter until you were making the documentary. Tell us about this letter that your dad wrote you that took decades to find.
Well, there's a couple of letters my dad wrote me. One was early on in our relationship when I was 17. We had a big fight, and he wrote me almost a letter of apology, explaining to me that it was going to be very difficult arguing with him for basically for three reasons. Number one, he could be very verbal and loud,
Hmm.
which was kind of his style. He was a tough kid from Boston. That was number two. He was a tough kid from Boston. You don't argue with guys like that. You know, he could just be a thug. And number three, he was rich and famous. So, you know, for these three reasons, it's going to be tough winning an argument with him. But then later on in life, when we were estranged from one another, he wrote me another nice long letter listing all the reasons why he was disappointed in me, frankly. And, you know, it was a long list of things that, you know, mistakes I had made and missed opportunities and, you know, just the lack of, you know, just a lack of accomplishment was really what it was all about
Hmm.
from his point of view. And that was the letter that my friends in recovery told me I should just go make an amends to him. That's a part of 12-step recovery. Just apologize to him for everything in it and see what happens. And that is when our relationship changed.
Let's talk about your career. So you do go off to college. Where'd you go to college?
Well, I started at the number three party school in the nation, UC Santa Barbara, and ended up at UC Berkeley. Mm.
So your career, you got into entertainment law and you worked in the music industry, correct, as well?
Yeah, yeah. I went to Loyola Law School. I practiced music law for about 7 years, and then came to the conclusion that practicing law was not my lifelong calling. You know, my dad was all about, you know, you got to feel passionate about the work you do. It's really important that you're inspired and you really feel like this is what you want to be doing. And I just wasn't feeling it at all. I just didn't. I mean, you know, I think I was a competent attorney, and I was really glad I went to law school and got that experience, but I just felt like I wanted to do something more. And also I wanted to do something that Leonard Nimoy could not do.
Uh
I
huh.
mean, my dad never went to college. He, you know, he could not do what I was doing. And I wanted to strike out on my own and create my own identity. But then after a while, I just wanted to do what my dad was doing, which was storytelling, which is why I segued into TV directing.
Well, one of the big things I was reading about you with music, the is it Information Society and the pure energy clip that's in that song. You had a lot to do with working that deal out. Tell us more about that because that's a pure. Is that your father's voice saying the line "pure energy" from an episode?
Yeah, they were just sampling Spock in that song, and they wanted to get his approval. And Kevin Laffey was the A&R guy at Warner Brothers, whom I happen to know. You know, he was representing the band and approached me and asked me if I could get my old man to sign off on it, and we did. And it's a terrific song, a- and it was a great opportunity, and it became a hit. I love the tune. Excuse me, and I was really glad to be able to help those guys out.
Yeah, it's one of those things I remember as a kid hearing the song and that line, and then someone at the schoolyard saying, "Hey, do you know that's Spock?" I'm like, "Wait, what? That's Star Trek?" It's like there's a song that has Andrew Dice Clay in it. I'm blanking on the song, but it has a drop from Andrew Dice Clay. I think a lot of this stuff was happening there in the '80s when the Star Trek movies were coming out. How was that for you during that time?
Well, I mean, the movies were exciting. I mean, the movies came in really in response to this whole Star Wars craze.
Hmm.
Star Wars came out in '77, I believe, and then Paramount started to think about, you know, maybe they should be making their own sci-fi movie based on the Star Trek franchise. You know, it started in 1980. The first motion picture was uh, unfortunate, I would say. You know, I have an interview with my dad on the Spock documentary talking about the fact that it really wasn't Star Trek. They were spending a lot of money on special effects and not on storylines. But then
Hmm.
it got on track, thankfully, with when Nick Meyer came on board and wrote and directed Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Then we really, you know, the train was really rolling. It was a great film. He did a great job with it. It was, you know, it was just a fabulous entertainment. One of my favorite of the Star Trek original movie series. So it was a great experience, and then, of course, the opportunity for dad to direct. So, you know, you got to love it.
When your dad wrote his book, "I Am Not Spock," how was that time for him? How was that time for you? I didn't read the book, but was that more of him saying he was trying to distance himself from the Spock character? Tell us more about that book and that timeline for you guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, he it was a mistake, I think. Excuse me, admittedly on his part. The publishers told him not to title it "I Am Not Spock." The fans were up because they thought he was basically saying, you know, I don't want to do Spock. I can do more than this. And, you know, and distancing himself from Spock, which was not what he was saying at all. He was literally saying, "Look, people, you have to understand. It's like get a life." You know, it's like Bill Shatner saying to the SNL crowd,
Yes, exactly. You got heat for that though.
"Yeah, get a life. I'm not Mr. Spock. I'm an actor who's playing Mr. Spock. You know, Spock's from Vulcan. I'm from Boston. Hello." It was just kind of a literal commentary and all that because people were coming up to him and calling him Spock and whatever. The fans were very upset by this. He got a lot of, unfortunate mail from them. And then, in the 80s, I think it was, he authored another autobiography entitled "I Am Spock" as
Hmm.
sort of an apology for that. He was never really trying to distance himself from the character. I think my dad was always very grateful for what the opportunities he had that Spock created for him. Look, in the 70s, when there was no Star Trek, my dad really pursued this theater career, which is what he wanted to do. It was very challenging for him as an actor, as an artist. He must have been in 12 different productions in that decade.
Wow.
And that was really something that, that Spock was responsible, plus the movies and the directing and all the other work that he did. So he was never really, he was never trying to distance himself from the character. He simply mistitled his first autobiography.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Adam Nimoy. His most recent book is The Most Human, talking about his relationship with his father, Leonard Nimoy, Spock from Star Trek. When Star Trek came to an end, the original television series, it came to an end. Did your dad or family ever think of what was going to come with this? So show just came to an end, and that was it, and on to the next gig.
Yeah, we didn't know what was going to happen. It was over, three
Mhm.
seasons over, and it was very unfortunate. NBC kept moving the time slots around. I mean, it was a writing campaign to save it, I think, for season three. And there were some good episodes in season three. I mean, Gene had left the show, so some of the quality had suffered, but they were still turning out some pretty good episodes. And we thought that was it. On to the next thing. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
nature of show business, show's over, you find something else to do. It was not I was shocked myself by the syndication market in the 70s. I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't really watching that much TV, but I was at UC Berkeley, and all the dorm rooms, when I would go to study with people, everybody would file out at 5 o'clock and cram into the TV room to watch Star Trek. That blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. And it was on 5 days a week, and there were these, like, these holiday marathons 24/7, 24
Uh-huh.
hours over the weekend of nothing but Star Trek, and I started to watch the show again, and that's when I realized, wow, this is actually a pretty good show. So, that was a shock to everybody that it really caught on during that syndication period.
Yeah, I remember growing up, that was for me watching it in syndication. I was born after the original run, but I remember as a kid, it was just like it was on every night. And I remember watching it and being into it, and then my parents tell me, "No, these are reruns." Like, "What? This is not a new show that I'm watching every single night." I was fascinated by the show, and I think the majority of America was captivated by the show when they saw it in syndication. Here in Las Vegas, we had the Star Trek experience at the then now the Westgate. It was the Las Vegas Hilton back then. Did you ever come out to the Star Trek experience out here in Las Vegas?
I've never seen that, no.
Oh, was that it was licensed? Was it, I'm pretty sure it was licensed through Star Trek, and hopefully you guys got royalties from it. But it was a whole immersive experience at a bar, the whole setup inside over there.
Yeah, they have some of that, like Quark's Bar at the Star Trek convention in Vegas. I mean, there's some immersive stuff there, and they rebuilt the bridge, and you know, that's always cool to be sitting on the bridge and sitting in the captain's chair. It brings up a lot of memories of when I was a kid on the set. I mean, it was like, Wonderland. It was so cool.
Would you just bounce around? Like, talk about the set when you're on there. Would you just bounce around from set to set? It's like the average kid going to work with their father, but would you just walk around and do your own thing as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, it's so cool to be on, in the transporter room when there's no one else there.
Uh huh.
It's not lit, it's not working, but it's real. It exists in just a small, tiny set. Being in sick bay and being in engineering and on the deck of the Enterprise, on the bridge of the Enterprise. I mean, it was just so. And then I'm being on the Planet of the Week on the stage next door. It was just, it was so cool. I mean, look again, JC. The fact is that I was just old enough to know what I was looking at. I mean, I had been watching a lot of '60s TV. I was a big fan of like The Outer Limits and My Favorite Martian and Lost in Space. So I was already like into sci-fi and so when the show came on, it was like I was very much aware of what they were doing, and I just have some incredible memories.
You said you would wander off the set. What other shows were being filmed? Did you stumble onto other TV shows that were being filmed on the same lot?
Well, no, they were all closed sets, but
Was
there was a lot going on. That right next door was Mission Impossible, on the sound stages right next to Star Trek. I mean, both shows were Desi Lou shows. This is when Lucille Ball, ran the studio at the time, and they greenlit both those shows at the same time. They were very expensive shows, both of them, but they went on to be very successful franchises. But no, I mean, you couldn't really wander around. I mean, it was just really about wandering around on Star Trek. I had pretty much carte blanche, and that was
sure.
cool enough. That was cool enough.
And Lucille Ball, most people might not know this. If it wasn't for Lucille Ball, Star Trek probably wouldn't have been made, correct? Wasn't it shopped around and no one was really interested in the show?
Yeah, I mean, it was a question of, look, she was running the studio at the time, and she was trying to make a name for herself in the studio. And she was interested in the project, but the studio, apparently the finance guys told her not to do it because it was going to be too expensive. And it was. I mean, there were a lot of cost overruns. It's a sci-fi show. It's very complicated, a lot of special effects.
Hmm.
It'd be a complicated show to begin with, but she felt strongly about the premise, and she's the one who greenlit the shows. It just always blows my mind that this crazy redhead, named Lucy Ricardo,
Yeah.
is so instrumental in Star Trek history.
For the love of Spock, can we still see the documentary on Netflix? Where can we find the documentary right now?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have control of it right now. It's being distributed through an independent distributor. It was on Netflix. They may still have it. I honestly don't know at this point.
But for you, though, I mean, that was a crowd-sourced movie, correct? You raised 600 some $1,000, and people stepped up right away. How did that make you feel when you got the funding to put that movie together? I know you had your budget in mind. You probably put it out there, man, to get this, and all of a sudden, boom, you were over budget. You were ready to go. How did that make you feel when everything came together?
Well, it's a great feeling. I mean, it's a fan-based film. Did crowd, funding for most of the budget. It was not an inexpensive film. We had to license a bunch of clips from Paramount. It was a great experience all around. We made it very quickly. We premiered it at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2016 to celebrate, 50 years of Star Trek. There was just a lot of fan positive reaction. I think we did a pretty good job on the film, and the reviews were pretty good. And it was, it was something I started with my dad. He
Hmm.
and I were working on it together, and then he passed away shortly after we began putting that film together. It was a very satisfying experience to be able to grieve and mourn my father by looking at all this material, putting this film together, sharing it with the fans. It was just a phenomenal experience.
Well, Adam, we appreciate you coming on the show. The Most Human is the book. You can still find the movie out there, the documentary, For the Love of Spock. This is a treat to chat with you and learn more about your father and your relationship with your father, and also your work as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Adam. We appreciate it.
JC, as always, live long and prosper.
There we go. Waiting for that. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Take care.